So I worked for a place for about 8 years when I was young. It was really the first computer job I had. And it started out training people in computer graphics, engineering graphics. A lot of engineers from the Long Beach Naval Shipyard. This is in CAD/CAM. Computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing. I actually developed courses in that. And computer-aided engineering, which was like finite element analysis. Let's just say that I left that company. I gave them a year's notice because I'd been there 8 years and I was pivotal to the operation. So they could put other folks to, multiple folks actually, to kind of take over. By that time, I was running the whole technical operation. It's a good job. And I liked the people I worked for. I got really a good break there. I didn't really have a lot of prospects, but I knew somebody that worked for a software company. She had been my technical support contact. I had been pretty heads down for 8 years and I didn't have a lot of contacts outside the company, but I had a few. And one of them was the technical support specialist for the software vendor for our main software we were using for engineering. Called her up. And back then there's no internet, there's no email and everything. So I called her up over there and said, I'm going to be making a change. And, I just thought I'd let you know and see if you know of any openings or have any suggestions for me. Now, we had been through some things together, which you'll hear in other career talks about my time before this. The one that I do for the high school, when I do that career talk, I cover what had happened with us together. It was pretty exciting stuff. Really exciting stuff with global impact. Anyway, but she, remembering that, and she wouldn't forget, she said, let me get me your resume. So I said, okay, I don't remember if I dropped it off. I think I dropped it off, or I mailed it or something. But I got her a resume, a paper resume, and she put it in there. And so about 2 weeks after I actually left, so Nancy called me and said, hey, Ruben over here in quality control would like to interview you. He'd like to talk to you. So I said, great. So I went over there and had a conversation. I was a good fit. The stuff that he had, it turned out that he had a guy going on vacation. I think he was actually going to rehab that had been running one type of system. They had a lot of different types of computers back in those days. Everything wasn't PCs or Linux like it is now. There were specialized operating systems, and they had 5 or 6 different ones that they dealt with. Ruben told me that his guy was going out for a while and he needed somebody to fill in. So it was a contract job. It wasn't something that was permanent. So I worked there on contract for, a while. I don't really remember exactly how long. And while I was there working on this one system and substituting in for it, Ruben pointed out, we've got these other systems and nobody really knows how to run them. They've been a disaster, and we just can't seem to get them working right in our testing lab. So I said, well, I'll go in there and figure them out. Now, it turned out that these were Unix, or they were a variant of Unix at the time. This is before Linux. And so, I don't know how, but I figured them out. There wasn't much documentation, but I got them to work, and then they performed well. And it turned out they were really nice and stable if you set them up right. There really wasn't any training. I don't think there was any training. I think maybe I got a hold of a manual or something. But anyway, they were very, very stable. It worked really well. They were really unusual. These were called Apollos. I don't even remember the models anymore, but they were Apollo. So you can look that up. Apollo computers. They were bought by HP. Really, really interesting stuff. So after a little bit, Ruben said, I think we ought to really hire you because you can do all this stuff. And I did some creative stuff in setting up the testing systems for the folks that came in. And they had the people that worked in technical sales support would come in and actually do the testing of the new releases before we put them out. We'd take maybe 20 to 25 iterations of the software before we'd actually release for production and ship them out. Back in those days, we shipped out tapes. So, I got to know some of the folks in technical sales support and got along with them and got to know a few of the developers, a few people that wrote installation code. It was really interesting. Then they got me going on another Unix system, which at the time was Sun Microsystems and Solaris, Sun OS and Solaris. Not being the primary person, but as a backup. So somewhere around there, Ruben said, I think we should just hire you full time as an employee. That was great. Wasn't really that long. But here's the point of the story. So Ruben and I sat down in his office, and he said, I just want you to know that we aren't doing very well with raises right now. And because of that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to bring you in above the salary that you were asking for. But I want you to understand I'm doing this with the idea that I'm basically giving you your raise ahead of time because I don't know if I'll be able to give you one anytime soon. Otherwise, it may be years before you can get a raise. So let's bring you in at the most I can do, within his budget. And I just thought that was lovely. I thought that was so amazing. I mean, obviously it was nice for me. I was not in a good negotiating position, and he didn't make me negotiate. He simply did what he felt was right, and showed me a courtesy that really is pretty astounding. Really, really a very fine person. So I have to tell you another story about Ruben. The funny thing, and if Ruben ever sees this, hi Ruben, and thank you very much. You were a prince, an absolute prince to work with, and I really enjoyed our conversations that we used to have after work. The other story about Ruben was that I've always done special things. I've always done oddball projects to just knock things down that needed to be knocked down. And I did stuff where they had clients, they had customers that used the software that had problems with the software. Sometimes they would fly me out to solve the problem, just to find out why it's not working for this customer. Since I used to teach this software, I taught it for 8 years. They figured that I'd probably, be able to solve it, and I did. But I also knew the system, so sometimes it's because their systems were set up wrong. The networking was wrong. The way the system was sized was wrong. Didn't have enough memory, that kind of thing. So I'd go out there and they'd fly me out. And sometimes I didn't have much notice and they'd just fly me out to go take care of it. And that was lovely. I also got to work a little bit with development. And sometimes I would get to solve some problem, or I'd change the way things were done to make things easier to maintain the systems in the quality control area. Eventually I ended up doing all kinds of stuff there. But the point is, Ruben put me in for a bonus because of some accomplishment, and that was great. And he got turned down. And so then, I'd do something else and I'd solve some other problem, and he put me in for a bonus. And after a while, he found out that there was some other manager that had it in for him and that was knocking down the bonuses just to get at Ruben. It had nothing to do with me. They didn't even know who I was, really, even though Ruben wrote a beautiful write-up for it. So he told me, he says, he said, I'm just kind of stuck. They're turning these down because of this guy, and I don't know what I can do about it. But he said, every time I put them in, I just list another thing that you've done, and the bonus gets higher, and I just keep putting them in. And he said, I'll just keep putting these in until they finally let one through. And after probably more than a year, one of them finally came through, and it was a ton of money. It was a really nice bonus. I think they just felt like they just couldn't keep turning it down, or maybe there's some other change that happened in there, I don't know. But eventually it got through, and I thought, that's really advocating for your people. It's a lot because of Ruben that I advocate for my people really, really hard. And I do interim management. I do a lot of things, project management, where it's not really, somebody would say, well, it's not really your people. But I still advocate for them. And I do it in a way that takes into account, what the company is and the decisions they have to make. And I understand their funding things and all that, and their budgets. But sometimes it's just putting a good word in for somebody. Sometimes if a manager hears about somebody in positive ways enough, it helps their career forward. So I always do that. I like to do it. I just did this on a support call that I called support on behalf of somebody that I was helping. Long story that I'll make very short. And, got on the phone, worked through it. it was a hard one. We got through it and everything. And then after, we finished, I said, is there a survey for your support or something? He says, well, we don't really have surveys, but I can give you my boss's voicemail. And I said, give me your boss's voicemail. And I gave a great review to their boss, and was careful how I said it and everything to give it the maximum impact, and did that because I think we have to support people. If you want more excellence, you have to support excellence. You can't let it go unnoticed if you want it to continue or if you want more of it. So I think the things that I learned from this, one of them is to take care of people even from the very beginning. Take into account what you're going to be able to do. And sometimes if you bring somebody in at a higher amount and you tell them you're doing this because you believe in them, they will come up to that level. And I did. I would walk through fire for Ruben and was extremely loyal. I think he was one of the finest managers I've ever worked with. But I've worked for a lot of really good ones. So it's hard to pick a number one. I don't like to do that. But I've had really, really good ones. So anyway, wherever Ruben is now, I hope he's having a great time because he certainly did right by me. And he set me an example that I have tried to follow in the decades since that time. Thank you.